In this video, we're going to deep dive into 6 of the most popular cases in the UAG lineup for the iPhone 16 Pro. I'll be a little repetitive throughout the video, so if you're one of the few people that watches the video from start to finish, you may notice I start to repeat myself a little bit. The purpose in doing that is because lots of times people jump ahead in video to the specific case they're interested in, and I don't want to not repeat something that I've already mentioned for a previous case if you're jumping ahead. So use the chapters in the video if that's helpful for you, if there's one specific one you're interested to hear about. 5 of these were sent to me by UAG for review. 1 I purchased for myself on Amazon. And we're going to deep dive into the pros and cons of each of these cases. I'll point out things that I like, things that I dislike, in hopes to help you make a more informed purchase decision if you're considering one of these cases for your iPhone. I've used these cases for a little over 2 months now and have a lot of hands-on experience, so I'll be able to tell you the pros and cons of each of these, as well as the case that I like the best out of this lineup. You may be thinking, but they're still in the box. How have you used them for 2 months? Or why would you put them back in the box? It's largely just so it looks cool in the packaging and you get a little bit of an unboxing experience, but also so I can remember the names of each of these as I go through them. So let's start with the Pathfinder. The Pathfinder is the case that most people think of when they think of urban armor gear. It's got all the traditional aesthetics and design cues that you would expect from a traditional UAG case. It's got fake torque screws that are, again, just for aesthetics. It's got some honeycomb patterns, which they'll claim helps with shock absorption. I'm not sure how much that matters in this case, but it definitely adds to the kind of industrial look of it. With all UAG cases, or not all UAG cases, but with most UAG cases, you're going to get oversized corners. I really like that about UAG. That's why they can claim 18, 16, 20, 25 foot drop protection. These oversized corners make it so that when you drop your case, chances are it's going to hit a corner first when it falls, just statistically speaking. So having these oversized corners really helps with that shock absorption. This case is rated at 18 foot for drop protection. I wouldn't have any concerns about any of these phones. Most likely if you drop your phone, it's just going to be from waist height as you pull it out of your pocket. So all of these will handle that and some. Some other aesthetics with this case, it's got some texture on the side just for gripping purposes. I do like the texture of this case and just having not a smooth back, but just some indentions and different texture variants going on here. Just feels interesting in your hand when you hold it. Also, it has the traditional slit buttons that you would expect. That makes these really clicky and really easy to press. One of the buttons that I don't like, and this is true of the whole UAG lineup, is they decided to do a cutout for camera control instead of a flush button with capacitive transfer down to the camera control button. This, to me, UAG is a premium brand. I wish they wouldn't have made this design choice, but they've decided to do a cutout so that you can touch the button directly. I suppose maybe depending on the material, having direct access could be better. The reason I don't like it is because, one, just the edge of this case is a little sharp here. Some are worse than others. The Pathfinder's not the worst out of the bunch, but the edge of the case is a little sharp here, and it just makes getting to the button a little more difficult because you have to kind of press down into this cutout. But the worst reason of all for having this type of cutout is this material by the case is now going to be a little extra flimsy. Generally with Pathfinders, I don't have issues with them stretching out. I have had issues with the Plyo stretching out before, but with the Pathfinder, I haven't really had that problem. But with this extra flimsy material here, that is a concern that this will either just break or it will stretch out over time. And that's true of all the buttons on the side, but it's really bad here at the camera cutout this year. This specific Pathfinder has MagSafe compatibility, so you can use MagSafe accessories. I've had no issues with this. I use it on a MagSafe stand at my desk when I'm working during the day, and I also use it on a MagSafe compatible or Qi 2 charger in the car. And even in some of my trucks and vehicles with tougher suspension, I haven't had an issue with any of these cases falling off. They stick to the magnet really well and no concerns there. The one thing to be concerned of, if this applies to you, it doesn't on these Anchor chargers that I use, but you can see the camera cutout is pretty raised there to provide protection for these camera lenses, which honestly, the camera lenses are made of sapphire. They're incredibly durable, just like the lens on the Apple Watch Ultra. I've had this for over 2 years now, and there's not a single scratch on it. So it's extremely, extremely durable glass. It can be scratched, but I'm less concerned about having this raised protection on the camera lenses. But one of the things to be aware of is because of that extra raised, you can see it kind of dips down into the shape here that they've made for the MagSafe, and it goes right up to this circle on the anchor. So I'm sure Apple has specifications about how large the diameter of these MagSafe components can be, but if you have some third-party MagSafe charger that is more than just a simple round that you see here on this anchor charger, then that may be something to be concerned about. Some of the others are a little worse, and I'll talk to those as I get to them. But for the Pathfinder, it's not that big of a deal as long as you have just the traditional normal round charger for MagSafe. This case also features 2 lanyard attachments, traditional lanyard attachments. UAG this year added a new proprietary lanyard that can go into the charging port and slide up into the back of the case on most all of their UAG cases and even other third-party cases. Unfortunately, UAG was unable to send me one of those, so I don't have it to show in this video. But you could consider going for one of those for a more durable, stronger attachment. But if you just have a normal traditional lanyard, you could loop that through either side of these. Not all the cases feature that, so if that's something that's important to you, the Pathfinder does have that on both of the sides. The front of this case does have a little bit of a raised lip, just enough for some slight protection if you were to drop it completely face down on a flat surface. I do have a screen protector on this, the Taurus screen protector that I featured in other videos. It does have a little bit of a raised surface. I've had on some of these cases, I've had the raised surface be so drastic that whenever I'm in menus where you swipe back from the side to get to previous menus, where that's difficult because of the raised lip. That's not the case with this Pathfinder case. That is the case with some of the other UAG cases. If that's a technique that you use for navigating menus frequently, swiping in from the left edge, moving backwards, then just know that the Pathfinder does not have that issue, so that's not something to be concerned about here. And that's the end of the Pathfinder. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the Essential Armor. The Essential Armor is a series that was introduced later in the UAG lineup. It's one that's meant to be more budget friendly, and you can tell it immediately as soon as you touch it that it is a more budget friendly case. The plastic looks and feels more cheap. I'm sure it's some other material that's fancier than plastic, or just a fancier type of plastic. But it just looks and feels way more cheap. On the pictures online, I thought it looked really cool, so this was the one that I purchased on Amazon. This wasn't sent to me by UAG. As soon as I unboxed it, it just immediately felt very cheap and plasticky. It's all one material, unlike some of the other cases, like the Pathfinder, that's 2 different types of material molded together. So I guess that is a benefit to this one, in that it won't separate because there's no 2 materials to separate, other than the MagSafe magnet coming off, which is prone to happen to cases. So that is a benefit to this, I suppose. It just feels extra plasticky and extra cheap compared to other UAG cases, but you get what you pay for. I think this case will probably have more of an issue with stretching just because of how thin and flimsy it feels already, especially here by the camera control button, where they've opted to go for a camera control cutout rather than filling that with a button that could transfer that capacitive touch down to the camera control button. Because of that, this is extra flimsy and extra stretchy, so I expect this to stretch out over time and be an issue with this case. If you're a person that changes your cases out frequently and don't plan on keeping this for the life of your phone, then maybe that's not a concern. But even just pulling on it, letting go, you can see it kind of stays poking out. So that is a concern for me with this case. Because of the sides flexing the way they do, you see just the tiniest bit of black bezel around the screen, but because of the flex, it kind of cuts in on the corners, and then you see more of the black bezel on the side. Someone pointed that out to me, and once it was pointed out to me, I couldn't unsee it. And so that's a little bit of a frustrating experience because, again, UAG is a bit of a premium brand. And when you have those small little differences like that, it can be kind of annoying to look at. The Essential Armor does feature the oversized corners. So when you drop your phone, statistically, it's going to hit a corner. So having those extra corners will really help with that impact. This one's rated for 15 feet, but all these cases are going to protect your phone extremely well. So this one's rated for 15 feet. All of the buttons, like almost all UAG cases, if not all, have the slits beside the buttons to make them extremely easy to press. That's definitely something I've always really appreciated about UAG cases. As far as the design cues on this one, there's a honeycomb pattern throughout the back. You can feel the texture raised, so that will create a little bit of air pockets and probably provide a little extra protection instead of it just sitting back flush on the back of your phone. That's a nice feature. This case does feature MagSafe. It has a little bit of a smoother back, but the magnet's strong enough that it's no concern. These have stayed on the magnet just fine, even in cars and trucks. Driving down rough terrain, I've had no issues with this case popping off. It's got quite a bit of a raised protection around the camera. I personally don't prefer that, but I think that's probably a design standard that Apple promotes. The camera lenses are extremely durable, so I'm not sure why people go through such efforts to add such a big raised out protection around the cameras, other than, like I said, it's probably something that Apple specifies in their guidelines for case manufacturers. But because of that, it makes it even extra rocky on a table. So if you like to lay your phone face up and put it on the table, just expect it to be kind of extra rocky. Some of the cases do have extra little dimples, or extra little, not dimples, but extra little pieces of plastic down here on the end that poke out. And that helps with the case being flush on the table. I really like that. I wish they would do that on all the cases, other than maybe just people filling it. I guess that's the only downside, or extra material to put there. I'm not sure why they wouldn't just do that, because it really helps offset this extra plastic that's extruding off the back to protect the cameras. The feel for this case is kind of just right. It's not too slippery, it's not too grippy. So I really like the way it feels. A lot of cases these days seem to be going with kind of these extra slick, soft touch backs. And I don't prefer that, because I feel like the case is going to fall out of my hand. This one leans more toward a slicker finish and a slicker side. So it comes in and out of your pocket really easy. But because of some of the texture on the sides with the buttons, and just the way the case is made with these indentions on the side around the back, it makes it so that it's easier to hold on to. And speaking of those indentions, it really helps with the thickness of the case too. Just having the corners a little bit more rounded makes it so that it doesn't feel as thick in your hand as some of the other cases. The cutout around the camera control on this case is a little more sharp on the edge, just because of the design and the way the plastic runs down the side of the case here. So it's not as bad as some of the others, but it is a concern that I just don't appreciate the way this feels when I use the camera control button. So something to be aware of if you use that feature a lot. And the only branding on this one is a small little UAG logo here at the bottom. If branding is a concern to you, just know that that small little UAG logo is the only thing you have here. And that is the essential armor for the iPhone 16 Pro. Next up, let's take a look at the Plasma XTE. This is the Plasma XTE by UAG for the iPhone 16 Pro. I had really high hopes for this case, and I was disappointed. I ended up using it quite a bit because of the high hopes I had for it. And in fact, it's the case I've been using the past few days to really get kind of a deeper experience with some of the features of it before I shoot this video. Some of the things I really like about it, I really like the design cues here. You've got a transparent back, but it's got these dots on the back that look really cool up against the back of the iPhone. And then also just having the metal MagSafe kickstand here in the back of the case with some color accents too, the gray and clear, especially once I put my white iPhone inside of it. I just really like the color choices here. It does have a higher raised lip on the front. I really like using the menu where you can swipe back in if you're going into settings and dive into general and then about, and then you want to swipe back out to the previous menus. Instead of going up and hitting the arrow in the corner, you can just swipe back from the left side of the screen. But you do have to do that from the edge. And because of the raised lip on this, sometimes that doesn't work first try. So I've gotten a little better at it, but it's just an annoying thing with this case because it has a little bit of a higher raised lip. But if that is something, maybe you don't use that feature, or that navigation style, but you really like a high raised lip to protect from those face first drops, then maybe this is a case for you to consider. It does have the oversized corners. They're not quite as oversized, I would say, as some of the other cases like the Pathfinder, but they are oversized and they have kind of a neat design cue to them. It fits the industrial, outdoorsy experience that the UAG brand is going for. I like these oversized corners, and like I've mentioned on the other cases, that oversized corners is going to help with drops because statistically, if you drop it, it's going to hit a corner. So those oversized corners are really helpful from that perspective. All the buttons on this one also feature slits that make them really easy to press. That's just a standard UAG feature you've come to probably love and expect from this manufacturer. The camera control cutout is probably one of the worst on this case of the UAG lineup. I don't like that they went with a camera control cutout to begin with, but especially on this Plasma XTE, there's a little bit of a design cue here where the case goes flat and then it pokes out. And because of that, on the side with the camera control button, it goes flat and then pokes out right where you're going to be pressing it with your finger. So when you go to put your finger on it, it's going to be pressing up against not only a sharp piece of plastic to begin with, but now a sharp piece that raises up. And it's just a really annoying experience. And I would not get this case if you're someone who plans on using the camera control button a lot and you think that's something that would annoy you or irritate you. On the flip side, you can maybe find the button easier without looking because you can just feel for that little notch and then go directly to the camera control button. But also, like the other UAG cases, because that camera control cutout is so large and there's just a really thin piece of material here holding that edge, it's going to make this be a problem potentially for stretching out over time, or maybe even just breaking that piece. You have the same thing by the volume buttons, but it's not been a concern on previous UAG cases I've used other than the Plyo, but on some of the other plasma cases I've used and Pathfinder cases, I haven't had that be a problem before. For the branding on this one, you have a really small UAG logo here at the bottom, and that's really it, other than the obvious design cues of this case that lead you to believe it's a UAG case. But the primary feature for this case is the kickstand that it has. And at first I was really excited about that. It is a two-way kickstand, meaning you can use it when your phone's in portrait mode. You can also use it when your phone's in landscape mode. The landscape mode only has one angle because the kickstand isn't adjustable in that direction when you're propping your phone up this way. But when you're in portrait, you can use the kickstand to stop anywhere along the way and it will hold the phone up. And that was working up until yesterday. Like I said, I've been using this phone for several days now and really trying to test out the kickstand, and it just has stopped working now in the portrait mode. So I can't recommend this case if you are planning on using that in portrait mode. Unless you want to reach out to UAG for the warranty, then you could so do that. But if you're not the type that likes to be bothered with that, then I wouldn't recommend this case for you. The feel of the hinge here felt really good the first time I used it, first couple times I used it. Then there became a little more play in the hinge. Like you can see it's got a little bit of play there before it starts getting hard to press. So there became a little more play in the hinge. And now it's gotten to the point where when I'm using it in portrait mode, it just does not want to stand up. So that's a fail from this case. I haven't contacted UAG to see what they would do about this or how they would fix it. Most likely they would just replace the case free of charge would be my guess. But that's not the purpose of these reviews. It's to give you my honest impression of what I think of the case, just using it straight out of the box new. And that's one of the concerns here. One of the other things you should be aware of is when you first get this, it may be that the kickstand is sticking off of the case a little bit and you think, well, that's going to be really annoying that it doesn't stay flush up against the case. That will drive me crazy if that's the case. But it's not, because the magnet in the back of the iPhone keeps it pressed up against the case. So if I go to push it back, you can see it snaps back on and the magnet holds it in place. So not something to be concerned about if you see this in a store and are playing with it and trying to decide if you should buy it. When you open the kickstand, there's not really a great way to grab onto this with just your finger. So you are going to have to use your fingernail to pull it out. So if you're the type that doesn't have fingernails, or maybe you're worried about damaging the finish on your fingernails, then that may be a concern for you because you do have to use your fingernail to pull that kickstand out. I'm not sure how this material will hold up. I've given it some kind of just decent tugs to see, and the case actually flexes and gives rather than this metal or the glue that's holding that metal on giving any indication that it's going to come off. So I don't really have any concerns there that you should be worried about the kickstand coming off. But unfortunately, the hinge has let me down and is not something that I would recommend to anyone at this point if you're looking for it for that purpose. The kickstand can still be used like a normal pop socket if you want to use it for just holding onto your phone, or maybe helping you to hold onto it better while you access the camera control feature. But using it as an actual kickstand, it will let you down, so I wouldn't recommend it for that purpose. The Plasma XTE does not have your traditional lanyard attachments, so if that's something you're looking for and are used to seeing in other UAG cases, then it's not something that this case has. You can use the new UAG attachment, lanyard attachment, to go through the charging port and anchor into the back of the phone. But if you're looking to use any other standard normal third-party lanyard, there's no lanyard attachments on this case. I guess they figure, if you have the kickstand on the back to hold on to, then why would you need a lanyard? But if you're someone that likes using lanyards, that's not an option here. Also, because of the flexibility in the kickstand, when you use it with MagSafe accessories, there's a little bit of play. Well, now there's a lot of play because I've, like I mentioned, been using this and had some issues with it. But it does have a little bit of play where it would come off the case. It's gotten worse since the hinge has kind of failed on me, but if you decide to go with this and you think the hinge isn't going to fail on you, or you know the warranty is going to cover you, just something to keep in mind. I had issues with it when I would go to pull it off of the MagSafe mount in my car. I'm used to just grabbing it by the top and pulling, but because of the hinge giving, it would pull off first like this and then come off. So I just had to get used to grabbing it by the bottom and pulling it up. So I use MagSafe a lot. I use it every time I drive. I use it at my desk daily. So maybe because of that, I've put more wear and tear on this hinge than you would maybe normally do, but it should certainly be able to hold up to that. I'm not putting it through any rigorous testing or forces that wouldn't be normal for daily use, and I've only had it for 2 months, so I definitely would be concerned about that if you use MagSafe accessories a lot. It does still charge through it, so that's not a concern. It attaches well and has no issues with it falling off other than the hinge giving now. But I had no issues with it falling off prior to that, and it does still charge just fine since there's no metal here in the middle to block the charging. But something to be aware of if you use MagSafe accessories, just when you go to pull it off, grab it by the bottom, and then it will come off a little better. I had really high hopes for this case. I love the design cues. I love the way it looks, the colors, the transparent back with the small textured dots throughout. And I really like having the kickstand built in, that it folds flush and you don't have anything sticking off the back of your phone because it's recessed down into the case. Unfortunately, just the way it's held up and in the portrait mode, it's not something that I could recommend to anyone at this point. Keep that in mind if you decide to give the Plasma XT a shot. Next up, let's take a look at the Plyo. The Plyo is UAG's all clear lineup, but they have them in different tints and colors. This is the specifically clear one, and it is all one material. So if you've had issues with Pathfinders separating over prolonged periods of use because of the two materials, just know that that is not a concern here because it is one material through and through. The only second material, I guess, would be the magnet here in MagSafe, which could eventually pull out over time. All cases are prone to do that, it seems, over time, but that is the only extra material here. It's one material throughout the sides and the back. There is texture on the inside sides. It feels like a sandpaper or a file. So that adds for a really neat look when you put your phone in it. It's something that you don't notice from afar, but when you look at it up close, you can see there's just the slightest little bit of texture going down the side of the phone. The back is completely transparent and looks great that you can see the iPhone completely through the back of the phone. I really like the design, the way this case looks. Also, because it's completely clear, one of just kind of neat features is when you turn on your flashlight, it illuminates the entire case. If you lay this on a nightstand at night and you could turn on the flashlight and it wouldn't quite be so harsh because you have just the case lighting up like a nightlight if you just need to use it for that purpose before bed or something. The branding on this one, not only do you get the small UAG logo on the bottom, but you also get just the smallest little UAG logo on the side here, just on this side. And it is kind of raised. It has just the slightest bit of texture to it on the side there. The buttons all feature the slits, cutouts that you would expect that make the buttons really easy to press and a pleasure to use. The camera control cutout is like the other UAG cases and is disappointing. This one is pretty sharp too. So the edge, it has just this really small, thin piece of material here that's kind of sharp. So when you go to press the camera control button, you're going to feel it pressing up against your hand. It's not something that hurts. It's just something that's annoying that they chose it to be that sharp or have that sharp of an edge. So also because of the extra big cutout here, there's just a really small, thin piece of material there that I do expect to give over time, either to break or to just bulge out, most likely just to bulge out because this is such a flexible material. The Plyo is the only case I've used before in the past that I have had issues with the sides stretching out. The one that I had on my iPhone 14 Pro, after using that phone for a couple of years, the sides started to bulge out and it would not go back in. So something to keep in mind with the Plyo series. The texture of this phone, or the grippiness of this phone, is really just the Goldilocks of grippiness. It's not slippery, it's not too grippy, it's just right. Some of the other UAG cases, I would say, lean more toward the smoother, slippier finish. None of them are too slippery that it's a problem. A lot of cases these days seem to have kind of a matte, really slick back, which I don't prefer. None of these cases have that. But this one is smooth. It doesn't have some of the texture that you would see on like the Monarch Pro here, where you've got different materials giving you an interesting texture to hold on to. It doesn't have that. It's completely smooth, but it's just got kind of a grippy, rubbery feel. So it's not so grippy that putting it in your pocket and pulling it out is difficult, but it's something that just makes it really easy to hold on to and just a joy to hold. So also the thickness of this case compared to some of the others, I don't know if it's because of the design choice of not having different textures and parts of the case that raise and lower, but it just feels thinner in your hand than some of the other cases, some of the other UAG cases that we're featuring here today. It does have traditional lanyard attachments, so if that's something that's important to you, know that it has two, one on each side of the bottom, and you can also use the new UAG lanyard attachment that goes in through the charging port as well. Because it's completely clear, you would also see that lanyard attachment here, which is kind of a neat, cool design choice too. This case has MagSafe compatibility and has worked great with it. All the UAG cases have, other than the Plasma XTE recently. But this is one that has held on well. The extra grippiness of the case, I feel like kind of helps it not slide on the magnet and really just stay put. I've had no issues or concerns with MagSafe accessories with this case. The raised lip on this at first was a little bit of a problem. Some of these UAG cases have raised edges that lift off the phone so much that it makes navigating some of the menus that require you to swipe in from the left edge difficult. Like when you're in the settings menu and you're going from settings, general, about, and then you want to swipe back from the left edge. Some of those have been difficult to navigate because of how tall the raised lip is on these cases. This one started that way, but I feel like I've kind of just gotten used to it and it's not a concern anymore. I would say probably 95% of the time it works just as expected, but it does have a little bit higher lip than some of the others. And so because of that, I haven't used it as much because I use that type of navigation in every single app that I use almost. So it's really annoying when you go to swipe from the left edge and pull back to go to the previous screen and it doesn't work as expected. If that's not a navigation style that you use and you really like the extra raised edge to protect it from face first drops on flat surfaces, then know that the Plyo case has that capability covered. The Plyo case doesn't have as much of an oversized corners as traditional UAG cases, though they are oversized. You can look and tell that the case could have rounded sooner here, but instead they chose to come off the phone a little bit before they rounded back in, adding some extra material here to the corners. So it is oversized. It's just not as oversized as some of the others. Because of that, that's probably why they went with a 16-foot drop test rating instead of some of the others that have 20 or 25 feet or even 18. But I would not be concerned about dropping my phone in this case at all. I've used Plyo cases in the past for long periods of time and have had no concerns with the protection that it provides. One of the questions I always get for clear cases, and so for the Plyo it would be applicable, is does it yellow over time? And my answer would be no, it doesn't, especially the back. The back will stay completely clear with no issues. The only thing I've noticed with these cases is they do pick up oils or dirt on the side edges, so you end up getting kind of some darker colors around the edges. I take my phone with me everywhere I go, so if I'm outdoors, if I'm gardening, if I'm changing the oil on a vehicle, I'm going to have my phone nearby, and so it's going to pick up some dirt. And then as I continue to use that case over many years, it will be something that you notice that it picks up. But in terms of just changing naturally from sunlight or what have you to a yellow shade, you don't have any issues with that with the Plyo series. Just to give you an extreme example, this is a UAG Plyo case for the iPhone 11 Pro. So this is 5 years old at this point. And sure, it took some scratches, but the back is still clear. And the only thing you have is just the darker edges, like I mentioned, just from picking up oils from your hands or maybe dirt over the years. The cases are made slightly different these days. This was a two-piece design where the back was kind of a harder plastic and then this was a more rubbery plastic on the side. But just to give you an idea from the color, that's been my experience with the Plyo, is that it stays crystal clear on the back and then just the sides start to pick up some color from the oils and dirts on your hands. And that is the Plyo case for iPhone 16 Pro. Next up is the Civilian. The Civilian is a really interesting UAG case for me. I purchased one of these last year for my iPhone 15 Pro and ended up returning it because it's just a little more bulky than I expected and not something that I'm used to with a UAG case, because generally UAG cases, though they provide a lot of durability and protection for your phone, they still feel kind of thin just because of some of the design cues they use. But the Civilian case for last year for the iPhone 15 Pro, I ended up returning because I didn't like how thick it felt in my hand. But this year for the iPhone 16 Pro, the case feels a lot better. It feels a lot thinner than some of the other cases. I really like this case, and it's been the one that I've been using the most out of the 6 for the 2 months that I've had it. This one definitely has a different feel in terms of design choices. The logo they went with here is just an abbreviated urban armor and then the word gear. So instead of your normal UAG, though you do still get UAG down the bottom there, they went with a slightly different design cue. It is mostly a smooth back. There are some texture elements here that you see, and the back does have kind of a slightly abrasive finish to it. It's not completely smooth, but I mean, it just doesn't have the raised textures and things that you see in some of the other UAG cases. So that's a little different here. It's got this little groove here on the back. Not really sure what purpose that would serve other than just the way the materials come together. But because of that little bit of a beveled edge, it makes the edges feel just slightly more sharp, but also could help contribute to the thinness that you feel of the case by having the edges turn in like that. This does appear to be multiple materials molded together, so I very rarely have separation issues on UAG cases unless I've used them for multiple years and have been very hard on the cases, so something to keep in mind. The Civilian case has kind of a honeycomb finish like a lot of the UAG cases on the back, creating air pockets to provide extra protection for dropping your phone. The only place it doesn't have that is around the MagSafe magnet that's made into the case. One of the color design choices they did for this case, which I really like, the olive green kind of military leaning that this case has, but also adding that blaze orange color around the camera cutout there. And then on the front of the case, it really kind of looks like the same glowing texture you get for Apple Intelligence to have these kind of orange cues in the corner. So I really like that color choice. So this one has black around the edge, the olive green on the back, and then orange in certain accent places. So really great color choices for me for the Civilian case. It features the slits by the buttons that all the other UAG cases feature. This one has extra large slits for some reason. If you look at the slits on the side by the volume button, the action button, and over here by the power button, they're just extra large slits. So it does make the buttons a pleasure to use, but the buttons work great on all the UAG cases. So I'm not sure why they went with such pronounced slits here. It does mean that more dust and crud is going to get into your case. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you take off your case after using it for a few weeks and it's just full of extra dust and debris. I do have a little bit in this one from the time I've used it. So having those really extra large slits by the buttons is going to cause for more of that to get into your case, and then over time that could rub between the case and the phone and end up scratching the glass on your phone or scratching the metal on the sides. I'm not too concerned about it, but just something I noticed with this case, for whatever reason, they went with really large extra slits by the buttons. The camera control cutout is the same problem as all the camera control cutouts on the UAG lineup. It's got kind of a sharper edge by the piece of material here that runs down the side of the phone. I really wish they would have gone with a button here embedded into the case instead of just having this as a cutout. But this one does have a little smoother of a transition than some of the others, but the front lip there is still sharper than I would like to see, and it's flimsier than I would like to see. So I would see this potentially breaking over time or at least stretching out. And you have the same issue here on the side by the volume buttons and the action button, and even down by the charging port, though it's not as significant at the charging port. Potential for these stretching out over time. I haven't used the Civilian series long enough to know, but just by the soft rubbery feel of these edges, I would expect that to give over time and be a potential concern, especially for by this camera control cutout. That is something that concerns me with this case. The Civilian case does feature normal lanyard attachments on the bottom corners of each side of the case, and then you can also use the new UAG lanyard through the charging port as well if you would like. This case does not really have pronounced oversized corners like you would see on the other UAG cases, and it doesn't have as much of a raised lip like the other UAG cases have. But somehow it still gets a 20-foot drop test rating. So not sure why the Civilian is so much more durable to the others when it comes to drop test rating, unless it's just some of the design cues on the inside that I mentioned with the honeycomb and maybe the material choices here. I don't feel like it's extra thick compared to the others. And like I said, it definitely doesn't have the oversized corners that I've come to expect and love from UAG cases. So maybe it's just the material choices, the softer rubber that I mentioned on the sides that may be prone to stretching. Maybe that helps with some of the absorption, but it is rated for 20 feet. If that's important to you, all these cases are going to be fantastic for just dropping them through normal daily drops that you would do when using your phone. Because of the raised lip on the front of the case not being so pronounced, it works really great for those navigation menus throughout iOS where you're swiping from the left edge back to get to the previous screens. Some of the UAG cases have a raised lip that's too high and creates an issue there. The Civilian does not have that pronounced of a raised lip on the front, so has just enough to protect your screen, but not so much that it creates a problem. I really like the size there. Out of all the cases that I've been using, the Civilian is the one that I go to on a daily basis. I did probably go to the Plasma XTE second most, but that was largely because I really wanted to understand how durable that kickstand was and answer that for everyone, which unfortunately the answer was not very durable in my experience. The Civilian case has been my go-to case out of the 6 and the one I've been using the most. I like the way it feels, I like the way it looks, and I know it's going to provide great protection. I'm able to navigate menus like I would like because of the raised edge not being so pronounced, and it just feels the thinnest and the less bulky in my hand compared to some of the other UAG cases. It does have MagSafe compatibility. If that's something you're interested in looking at, all the cases I do have that because I use MagSafe a lot and it's something that's really important to me. So I make sure that I don't buy a case unless it has MagSafe capability built in. The MagSafe capability on this case has been great and I've had no issues with it. I do notice just the slightest little bit of a ring there on the back as it's rubbing the back of the case. Maybe because the case has just the slightest little bit of texture. Maybe because of that texture, it's starting to rub some of that off, and that's why you see some of the transfer there or the ring showing up. I suspect over time I'm going to start to see more and more of a pronounced ring on the back of this case, but that's not a concern. The other ones do that by default and have it built in. So since this one doesn't have it showing on the back, you'll just start to notice that over time, but not a concern. Most likely when I'm done with this testing, this will be the case that I keep on my phone most of the time, but I do like to change up cases from time to time, so I'll end up using them all, I'm sure. But this will be the one that's probably my go-to most of the time. And now for the last case, we'll look at the one that's the most expensive, the Monarch Pro. The Monarch Pro is really kind of the most ridiculous high-end UAG case that you can buy. And it screams that the moment that you open it. It's made with Kevlar. It features 25-foot drop protection, so much greater than the others. But you do notice it by the thickness of the case and some of the design choices they've gone with. So if you're looking for a case that's kind of that really original OtterBox Defenders type durability, then the Monarch Pro is something for you to consider. You can definitely tell it's more of a rigid, durable, heavy-duty case. The first impression, as soon as I put it on my phone, was this thing is pretty heavy. Because of some of the metal choices that they've went with here, the material choices in the back, it does make it a little heavier than some of the other cases. So if that's a concern to you, then maybe steer clear of the Monarch Pro. But usually people that want a more durable, extremely robust case aren't really concerned about weight. That's not a concern. And if you are wondering about the weight, it doesn't create any issues for MagSafe compatibility. The magnets in these cases are very strong and they hold on well. I've used these in my truck and other vehicles with truck chassis that going across bumps and hitting things, and I haven't had any issues with it falling off. So no concerns there. The magnet is super strong and holds on really well. The material choices are what initially stands out about this case. You've got colored metal on the back, colored Kevlar in the inset part here, as well as some color highlights with this red that you see. I love the color choices with this one. This one looks really great. Also, you have actual metal screws. They don't serve any purpose that I'm aware of, but rather than just going with kind of rubbery fake Torx screws, you actually have metal screws in the Monarch Pro. The side also features some textured honeycomb on each side, so when you're holding the case from the side, you get to feel the grip there on the side, which makes it a little easier to hold onto as well. It has really oversized slits around all the buttons too, so great buttons, probably the best of the experience of all the UAG cases with the material choices here. But because of the slits being a little extra big, you could have dust and debris getting in there, so be aware of that. But the buttons on all the UAG cases work extremely well, so not something that is necessarily a downside to the other cases. This one just appears to work the best out of all the cases I've tried so far. The design choices on this case just scream premium. From the colored metal material, the colored Kevlar in between, you've got some color metal accents here, as well as the actual metal screws. So UAG cases have a lot of, Pathfinder especially, have had a lot of screws over the years that were fake rubbery screws. The Monarch Pro has actual metal screws. I don't think they actually do anything. They don't, unless they maybe are like fusing the different materials together in some way that I don't see. They are recessed on the inside, so you don't have to worry about them pressing the back of your phone or hitting the back of your phone. It does have a bulkier feel than the other UAG cases. Because of that, plus the extra weight of the case and the extra high raised lip on the front, it's not a case that I would use on a daily basis. It's probably the one I've used the least out of the 6 as I've had them. But if you're looking for kind of that premium looking case and something that's extra super durable when it comes to drop protection, then the Monarch Pro may be the case for you. It's rated at 25 feet compared to the 20, 16, or 18 feet that some of the others are rated for. But all the UAG cases are going to be extremely durable when it comes to drop. This one's just going to be a little extra super durable. It has really large oversized corners, but also just the material itself is a little extra thick. All the other cases have a really pronounced protection ring around the cameras on the back. This one is not so pronounced, but it's mainly because the case itself is thick from the different layers of the Kevlar, the metal, then the outer rubber material as well, so it doesn't feel as pronounced, but just know that it's because the case itself is a little extra thick too. It's going to feel a little bit more bulky in your hand. Because of that extra high raised lip on the front, it does present issues when swiping back from menus, like when you're navigating through the settings menu or you're looking at a specific item in your cart and then you want to swipe back from the left side of the menu to go back to the previous screen. It does present challenging issues with that at sometimes. Again, probably maybe 75% of the time it works just fine with no issues. But if that's a gesture that you use a lot to navigate menus on the phone, just know that could be an issue. Only when you need to swipe from the very far left edge to get in. If you're just swiping from the middle of the phone, then it's obviously not going to create a problem. Out of all the UAG cases, the one that I would expect the camera control button just be a normal cutout, it would be the Monarch Pro. You really think they would have filled this in with some kind of premium material that would transfer that capacitive touch down to the camera control button, but they didn't. This is the most disappointing for me because this is the most premium of the premium line of the UAG cases, and we just get a cutout for the camera control button. And you have the same issue here with kind of the sharp edge here on the material. And look at that. I mean, it's just frustrating how flimsy that is on such a otherwise really rugged and premium high-end case. This feels like the camera control cutout was a thing that Apple kept hidden that no one knew about until the very last minute. And so then UAG just made a rush decision to try to get these cases out as quickly as possible. I'm speculating here. They didn't tell me that. I don't have any reason to believe that from anything they've said. But the fact that you would take a super high-end premium UAG case and the most premium of all the UAG cases and then just give it a cutout for the camera control button, that's not a choice I would have expected. So that's a little frustrating. I expect this to potentially stretch out over time and create issues. The one on the volume side has a little bit of the same give to it, so either of those could be a concern, honestly, because that has some of the same give that you see around the camera control cutout too. Because they went with one large slit by the volume up and volume down button, it ends up making this part of the case really flimsy as well, similar to around the camera control cutout. So These are not choices that I would prefer UAG to make, and something that I would be concerned here just with that material stretching out over time and being a concern on what is otherwise a uber premium case. As far as branding goes, you get the one UAG logo on the back of the case, and if you turn the case upside down, it spells gin. You do have traditional lanyard attachments on the Monarch Pro, so you could attach a traditional lanyard in either corner, or you can use the new UAG lanyard that slides up through the charging port as well. This case has extra beefy oversized corners compared to some of the other UAG cases, which all have mostly oversized corners anyway. But this one has really oversized corners, which I think helps with the 25-foot drop protection, because unless your phone falls perfectly face down or perfectly back down, it's going to hit a corner first, and having those extra oversized corners is going to really help with that drop protection. One thing that's such just a incredibly minor attention to detail, but it just really tells you the type of premium craftsmanship that's gone into this case, is that it has a lay flat design when laying on its back. So all the other cases feature the raised protection around the camera cutout, and because of that, it offsets the case and makes the case wobble on its back. But the Monarch Pro has added two little nubs here that stick off the bottom of the case, as well as one on this corner, and it offsets that camera cutout raised ring and causes it so that the case lays flat on its back. It's a really minor detail and something that most people probably don't even care about, but it's something that's been featured on other UAG cases, and it's not on any of the other 5 I featured, but I'm so glad it's covered on the Monarch Pro here. Should you get this case? Should you pay the premium for it? I mean, if you really like kind of flashy cases that really have a design aesthetic that shouts, "Look at me," then yeah, maybe. I mean, it has really premium materials and really cool colors, and it's got really super rugged protection for your iPhone. So if those are things you're looking for, then this is a case you should consider. For me, all the UAG cases provide plenty of protection for my phone, and having the extra bulk and the weight that this case gives you is just not worth the trade-off for me. But if this is the design you're looking for and you want that extra protection, then maybe it's a case for you to consider. I certainly don't have anything bad to say about it, other than what I mentioned before with kind of the stretchiness around the volume button and the camera control cutout, and then just the heaviness and the bulk of the case. So in summary, if I just try to wrap this up really quickly and tie it off with a nice neat bow, the case that is not my favorite, that I would definitely avoid, the Plasma XTE. The kickstand has failed on me. Again, these cases have great warranties. I've never submitted a warranty for one, but my understanding is they have great warranties, and so that's probably something that UAG would just replace, and maybe I'd never have that experience again, but I would not get one of these just based on the performance of that kickstand. The Essential Armor is one that feels extremely cheap. I like the way it looks. I like that it's one material, but it feels extremely cheap, and it's probably going to have the biggest issue with the sides flexing on me. So that would come in second to last place for me. Next up, for me personally, would probably be the Monarch Pro. This is an amazing case in terms of premium materials, rugged protection. So definitely nothing negative against this case, other than just it's heavy and bulky, and it's not the case for me. But if those things that it does have are what you're looking for, then I'd highly recommend it. It's a great case, as long as you don't mind the bulk and the size and the weight. Next up, in order of my preference, would probably be the Plyo, strictly because I like the grippiness of this, and I like the look of this. I just don't like that the sides are going to flex out over time. That's going to be a concern for me, and I've had that happen to previous Plyo cases over years of use, not in 6 months. So that's something to be aware of. So Plyo would get a bronze rating out of the 6 cases that I tested by UAG. And in second place, I would have to give it to the Pathfinder. This is the original UAG case that everybody knows and loves. It's still got all the design aesthetics that you would come to expect from a UAG case. The protection, the great feel in your hand, the texture, the look. I really like the way this case looks with having kind of the transparent or clear back and the color choices. So Pathfinder comes in second place. And then my top pick out of these 6, and like I said, the one that I'll be using the most, is the civilian case. I really like the thinness of this case. I like the way it looks. I like the design choices. I end up not liking the kind of smoothness of the back, strictly from a interesting texture. The way this one has materials raised and just things to feel in the back of your hand. So Plasma XTE has that, Monarch Pro has that, whereas like the Plyo, the Essential Armor, and the Civilian all have kind of a smoother back. The Civilian does have a tiny bit of nuance there with just these designs, but the Civilian's the one that I end up using on a day-to-day basis, largely because of the way it feels in my hand. I know it's going to provide plenty of protection, but it's still kind of a thin case that feels really great. One of the cases that UAG didn't send in this set initially is the Metropolis LT. I used the Metropolis LT for my iPhone 14 Pro and absolutely loved it. I love the material choices. I love the thinness of it. For whatever reason, it was one of the thinnest feeling UAG cases in my hand. So I'll be looking to feature one of those in a future video, hopefully. So make sure you click subscribe if you want to see how that stacks up to these other 6 that I've looked at already. I hope you found this content helpful and it's helped point you in the direction to see if you would want to use any of these cases for your iPhone 16 Pro. If you have found it helpful, then I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, or maybe even click subscribe if you like this content, would like to see more of it, or would like to see the magnetic ring stand when I feature that, or the Metropolis LT in a future video, should I get my hands on one of those. I really appreciate you sticking around to the end of this video, and as always, thanks for watching.